To understand what it means for an agent to behave rationally or irrationally, we must distinguish the architecture that makes rationality possible from the function that realizes it. Rational behavior is not simply having beliefs, making choices, or responding to stimuli. It is the successful deployment of a cognitive structure capable of tracking, weighing, and acting on reasons. This structure, representational, inferential, and reflective, provides the enabling conditions for rationality, but it is the function of responsiveness to reasons that constitutes rational performance. When that function succeeds, we call the agent rational. When it misfires despite the enabling conditions being present, we call the agent irrational. And when the architecture is absent altogether, the agent lies outside the domain of rational evaluation. This framework allows us to define rational and irrational behavior with precision by grounding both in the relationship between structure and function. 1. Rationality requires an enabling architecture. Rationality is not identical to the structure that supports it. Rather, structural capacities are enabling conditions. Functional responsiveness is rationality itself. A being is rational only when it has the architecture that makes responsiveness to reasons possible and it can deploy that architecture to track, weigh, and act on reasons. Thus, structure equals the enabling condition. Function equals the active responsiveness to reasons. Rationality equals successful functioning of that architecture. This distinction lets us cleanly separate rationality from the mere possession of cognitive machinery. 2. Irrationality is functional failure, not structural absence. Irrationality equals failure of the rational function in a being that has the enabling structure. This means, irrationality is not error. Irrationality is not lack of capacity. Irrationality is not absence of architecture. It is a breakdown in the functional responsiveness to reasons. Justification reveals this. If the architecture is present but the function misfires, the agent cannot properly engage with reasons. 3. Distinctions clarified. Irrational. A being is rational when it possesses the enabling architecture, representation, abstraction, reflection, and successfully deploys it to respond to reasons. Rationality equals functional success given the right structure. Be irrational. A being is irrational when it possesses the enabling architecture, but the rational function misfires, is distorted, or is blocked. Irrationality equals functional failure with structure intact. This is why humans can be irrational but rocks cannot. See irrational. A being is irrational when it lacks the enabling architecture altogether, and therefore cannot deploy rational functions. Irrationality equals absence of structure, not failure of function. This includes plants, simple animals, non-representational machines, and pre-rational humans. To qualify the humans included in this definition, they still may be the kind of being which comes to possess rationality, or said otherwise beings are a rational kind. 4. The functional taxonomy, now cleanly indexed. 1. Impeded function, structure present, function blocked. The architecture is intact, the system is trying to respond to reasons, but interference prevents proper execution. This yields irrationality. 2. Impaired function, structure present, function non-deployable. The architecture exists, but the mechanisms enabling its use are damaged or offline. This yields non-performance, not irrationality. 3. Absent function, no enabling architecture. The being lacks the structural conditions for rationality. This yields irrationality. By indexing rationality to functional responsiveness and treating cognitive structure as its enabling condition, we can clearly distinguish the different ways agents succeed or fail in the space of reasons. Rational behavior is the successful operation of a structure designed to track and respond to reasons. Irrational behavior is the malfunction of that structure, an impeded function, not an absent one. And irrational behavior reflects no failure at all, but the absence of the architecture required for rational evaluation. This taxonomy preserves the normative force of rationality, while explaining why only some failures count as irrational. It gives us a principled way to say what it means to behave rationally, what it means to behave irrationally, and why not every deviation from truth or success belongs to either category. Cases. Rational case, the engineer's meaningful doxastic choice. An engineer evaluates conflicting data, checks load-bearing calculations, considers safety constraints, and forms a justified belief about which design is structurally sound. Structure, fully present. Function, successfully deployed. Result, rational responsiveness to reasons. Impeded irrational case, drug-impeded agent. A person under the influence of a drug still has the cognitive architecture for rationality, but their reasoning is distorted. They misinterpret evidence, ignore relevant risks, or draw conclusions they themselves would reject. When sober, they are being functionally misdirected in virtue of a non-apprehended reason. If they apprehended the facts as to why they were being impeded to some degree that can still be responsive to reasons, given a humility of reason apprehension qualifying their actions as still reason responsive and selective. Tipsy versus blackout. Selective versus impulsive. Structure, present. Function, impeded or distorted. Result, irrational, failed responsiveness with structure intact. Unimpeded irrational case, repeating the same action while expecting a different result. A person repeatedly submits the same flawed code to a compiler, receives the same error message each time, but continues to believe that this time it will work without making any changes with defeating priors. It has not shown to be correct in other matters of compiler error. They possess the full cognitive architecture for rationality. They understand cause and effect, they can read the error message, and they know how compilers work, but they fail to update their belief or behavior in response to clear, stable evidence. Structure, present. Function misfiring, failure to integrate repeated evidence. Result, irrational, a breakdown in responsiveness to reasons. This case is ideal because the agent has the rational architecture. The reasons are available, accessible, and obvious. The agent fails to update despite repeated disconfirmation. The failure is functional, not structural. Impaired case, brain damaged or unconscious agent. A person in a coma, under deep anesthesia, or with severe brain injury has the architecture for rationality in principle, but it is non-deployable. They cannot form beliefs, evaluate reasons, or act for reasons. Structure, present in principle. Function, unavailable or offline result. Impaired, not irrational. Irrational case, mold growing on a surface. Mold spreads across a wall or piece of bread. It reacts to moisture, nutrients, and temperature, but it has no representational states, no beliefs, no abstraction, and no capacity to act for reasons. Structure, absent. Function impossible. Result, irrational, outside the space of reasons. How philosophers cash out these terms. 1. Rationality equals successful reason responsiveness. In contemporary analytic philosophy, rationality is almost always cashed out in terms of responsiveness to reasons. Different traditions phrase it differently. Scanlon Parfit Raz. Rationality is responding correctly to the reasons one has. Korsgaard Smith. Rationality is the successful functioning of the normative capacities that constitute agency. Bratman Vellman. Rationality is the proper operation of planning, intention, and belief formation structures. Across these views, the core idea is the same. Rationality is a functional success condition. It's not just having beliefs or making choices. It's getting the reasoning right given the architecture you possess. Irrationality equals failure of a capacity you possess. Philosophers treat irrationality as a malfunction of a rational capacity, not its absence. This is standard across. Davidson. Irrationality equals breakdown in the coherence of a rational system. Scanlon. Irrationality equals failing to respond to reasons one recognizes. Hieronymy. Irrationality equals defective control of one's evaluative attitudes. Arpely. Irrationality equals motivational or evaluative misalignment despite capacity. The key shared commitment. Only beings with rational architecture can be irrational. Irrationality equals outside the space of reasons. Irrationality is the philosopher's term for not in the game of rational evaluation at all. This comes from McDowell. Animals without conceptual capacities are outside the space of reasons. Sellers. Rationality requires being in the logical space of justifications. Strawson. Irrational beings are not appropriate targets of reactive attitudes. Dennett. Some systems only warrant the design stance, not the intentional stance. The shared idea. Irrational beings lack the architecture that makes rationality possible.